In this tutorial, we're going to combine different techniques to explore a dataset using the gene set and network module enrichment and expansion tools, Venn diagrams, and the node-link co-visualization options. Here we have two sets of single continuous tracks from the Sabates-Belver and Galam studies, showing the log ratio differences in gene expression between the normal and adenoma colorectal tissue samples, along with their respective tracks of pre-computed significantly differentially expressed genes. Let's assume we'd like to identify gene modules in the cytokine-cytokine receptor interaction pathway that are enriched with significantly differentially expressed genes showing at least a four-fold change in either of the two datasets. First, let's add a track for the cytokine-cytokine receptor interaction pathway from KEGG using the track browsing option discussed in Tutorial 2. Next, let's first run the value-based filters on our two datasets to filter out those genes with less than four-fold changes. The data in these tracks is log-base 2, so let's enter -2 and 2. Now let's use the Venn diagram tool to create a union of these two tracks. First, let's compare the track of the genes with greater than four-fold changes from the Sabates-Belver study with the track of pre-computed significantly differentially expressed genes to see if any of those highly differentially expressed genes were not also found to be statistically differentially expressed. Check the box next to the track title in the track comparison panel to add it to the diagram. As we might expect, all of the genes with greater than four-fold changes or more were also found to be statistically significantly differentially expressed. The same is true for the Galam study. Now let's create a track that is the union of the genes with four-fold or greater changes. As we can see, the tracks of highly differentially expressed genes and the cytokine-cytokine receptor interaction pathway both contain genes scattered across many different gene modules across the entire gene network. Let's search for gene modules within the pathway that are enriched with highly differentially expressed genes. One method for comparing where these two tracks of genes overlap is by visualizing all of the enriched gene modules for both tracks using the module enrichment tool as discussed in Tutorial 5. It turns out that there's just one module that's enriched with our genes of interest in both tracks. Similar to the gene set enrichment tool also discussed in Tutorial 5, we could use the Venn diagram tool to create a new track of the intersection of our highly differentially expressed genes and the genes in the pathway. If we want to co-visualize these tracks within a network context, we can use the Track Co-Visualization tool. Let's try the Present Nodes Co-Visualization option on our two tracks of interest for the fully zoomed out network. This module here is clearly enriched with highly differentially expressed genes. Now let's zoom in to see the gene symbols for the genes in this module. CCL5 is one of those genes. We can use that gene symbol to zoom in on this gene module in the track viewing area. Now we're zoomed into CCL5, and as we can see, it's zoomed into the same module as we identified before. Let's zoom out to view the entire module by clicking on it in the module viewing area. Now that we're zoomed into this module, let's use the node-link co-visualization tools to visually inspect our genes of interest just for this selected module. First, using the Present Nodes option, it's clear that all of the highly differentially expressed genes of interest are also members of the cytokine-cytokine receptor interaction pathway. Using the Visible Range node-link option, notice that many additional genes not present in either the pathway or the track of highly differentially expressed genes are still tightly connected to our genes of interest. We can also take a quick look at the single continuous tracks using the co-visualization tool to view this gene module with the heat mapping information from the two datasets. What if we wanted to ask what other pathways might be related to this gene module of interest? To do that, let's first run the network expansion tool, as discussed in Tutorial 5, on the track of the intersection of the cytokine-cytokine receptor interaction pathway and the highly differentially expressed genes. Now we have a track of highly differentially expressed genes that are also in the pathway of interest and their closely connected neighbors. Next, let's run the gene set enrichment tool, as also discussed in Tutorial 5. As we can see, a number of other pathways, including the chemokine signaling pathway, are enriched with the same highly differentially expressed genes in our pathway. Let's add the chemokine signaling pathway using the Search Tracks tool. Notice how all of the genes from the cytokine-cytokine receptor interaction pathway in the module are also in the chemokine signaling pathway. Using the Venn diagram tool, we can view the amount of overlap between the highly differentially expressed genes from our adenoma colorectal tissue samples and the genes from these two pathways at a global level. 10 out of 12 of the highly differentially expressed genes in the cytokine-cytokine receptor interaction pathway are also in the chemokine signaling pathway across all the genes of the network. Finally, let's co-visualize the cytokine-cytokine receptor interaction pathway with the chemokine signaling pathway at a global level using the present nodes co-visualization option while zoomed out. Notice how a large number of the genes in this section of the graph are shared in both pathways. Zooming in, we can see the same gene, CCL5, that we used before to zoom in on our module of interest. We can also view both of these pathways and our highly differentially expressed genes all in one graph at a global level by first creating a union of the three tracks using the Venn diagram tool, and then using the Node Link Present Nodes tool when zoomed out. The nodes in the union track are color-coded both in the track viewing area and also in the graph. Overall, using NetGestalt, we discovered that a large number of highly differentially expressed genes present in the cytokine-cytokine receptor interaction pathway are also concentrated in a gene module shared with the chemokine signaling pathway. This concludes Tutorial 8.